Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Carrie Arnold. I'm the Program Director for Evidence-Based Coaching here at Fielding Graduate University. Today is December 8th, 2021. Happy holidays. I want to welcome you into this space and ask you to be muted for the session. This is our monthly coaching and context webinar series that we've been doing now for at least 2 to 3 years now. And each month we bring in a speaker who is either a thought leader in the field of coaching or who is a scholar who's done some specialized work that serves the coaching community. And today I'm very excited to bring in my colleague, Dr. Holland. She and I both studied together at Fielding and have stayed very close, and I'm very excited to support her. She has just launched a new book with a coaching focus on self-motivation mastery. I think something probably we can all relate to, or we have clients that can be, obviously relate to this topic as well. We are recording this session. It will be made available on the Fielding website. It is eligible for 1.0 CCEUs. It's in resource development. I will be posting a link for an evaluation towards the end of the session. Please complete that within 24 to 48 hours, and the registrar's office at Fielding will issue you your PDF certificate. Let me say a little bit about Anne, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Anne has 25 years experience in multiple different industries. She has a PhD from Fielding, and self-motivation, motivation in general, is her niche. That's what she likes to study. And her dissertation at Fielding was just the tip of the iceberg. Like many scholars, the dissertation is not where you end, that's where you begin. So I'm excited to bring her in. She's a coach. She runs her own business, and she's worked in multiple different industries. I'll let you, Anne, talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to turn the floor over to you now.
Great. Well, thank you, Carrie. I so appreciate the opportunity to be among the coaches and other scholars and practitioners. So it's been, it's a real privilege for me to be a part of this. Just a tiny little bit about my background as far as the different industries I've worked in. I have found I've worked in government, I've worked in private practice, I've worked in education, I've been in retail, I've been in oil and gas, I have been in many, many, many different disciplines. But what I have found across each and all disciplines is people are people are people. So that is the common thread, regardless of what industry that they're working in. And one of the my inspirations and motivations to go to Fielding and to get my doctorate was I always wondered what motivates some people and not other people. How do we get down into really the root of how do we help people become intrinsically motivated? That's always been in the back of my mind throughout my studies at Fielding, my coaching. And so finally, I was able to take the time during our COVID break, if you will, to take advantage of that and do some work in the field of self-motivation. And what I really come to find out is that there's just a lot of elements to what motivates one person more so than and the other. And some of it's very scientific, using the discoveries and the principles based in neuroscience, positive psychology, and emotional intelligence. That's where we take those three different disciplines, if you will, and learn a lot about what is motivation and how does it work, and really how does it work for some better than others, and how can we coach people to be able to discover their own self-motivation. So I identified some of these different key elements to discovering your self-motivations as your superpowers. So that was just kind of my way of labeling it in a fun way. So let me just move forward. Sure. There we go. Can you all see the next screen? Okay, good deal. All right, so certainly in alignment with how we do our dissertations and our doctoral work, we say, what is the question? What are we trying to address? And my question here is, if you're not a naturally motivated person, how do you find the inner drive to achieve the success you deserve? So again, why do some people possess a bottomless pit of motivation while others just need an extra push or a little bit more of an oomph to get excited and to stay excited? So if, I believe that you can discover your personal path to self-motivation by applying what we've discovered in brain science, as well as what we've discovered in psychology and emotional intelligence. And what we really have found in those disciplines is that, the more you learn about how your brain works, and the more you learn about how your mind works, and most importantly, the more you learn about how your brain and your mind work together, is really going to set you up for being able to discover your own internal superpowers to mastering your self-motivation. So each chapter in the book, I have dove into this specific topic, and really describing how you can find your inner drive to self-motivation. And at the end of each of those chapters, there's a list of key concepts so that it's an easy recap. And if once you've finished it, you can always go back and check those key concepts, and that's a good refresher. And also at the end of each chapter is an activity. So in the coaching spirit, really helping the client, and or if you're the client or if you're coaching a client, to be able to apply not only what they've learned, but sometimes even to do a little work, if you will, to help them to discover their inner motivation. So what is motivation? My definition that I have borrowed is to move into action. So first, I just want to address inspiration versus motivation, because sometimes those two terms are used interchangeably, but I would argue that they are absolutely different. Inspiration is really, from my perspective, an awakening of a state of mind. So someone or something excites you, or excites a desire within you to do something, whereas motivation is more moving towards that action. So, just considering the journey that you may be on, full of ups and downs and twists and turns, motivation is what keeps you moving forward. Whereas inspiration, I would say, gets you to the gate, but motivation helps you down the slalom, if you will, and across the finish line. So it's really, how do you get to that end state, whatever your destination or your goal might be. Motivation is also very different for each and every person. No two people are the same. And your motivation may be different in different phases of your life. What motivates you in your teens may not be what motivates you in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, and on throughout your life. So the other thing too is how you define success is going to be very unique to you. And so whatever success looks like, it's going to link back into your motivating factors as well. So each of us have our own unique motivators. We each have our own definition of success, which really helps us drive the path that we're going to search out and find our success. And then we own that. That's for us to determine and for us to own. And I think that's also an important part as you're coaching individuals through this process, as we always do. We say, you own your behavior, you own your thoughts, you own your action, and you own your path. And the coach helps guide you and set you up for that self-discovery portion of it. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you to find that path. So we hear about countless athletes, entertainers, celebrities, professionals in the corporate world who are, achieve this incredible success, however they may define it. And we say, what drives them? How have they learned to tap into their inner motivations and their inner desires? So motivation comes from what I consider, it's an interaction between the conscious and the unconscious triggers that are linked to internal influencers, such as your desires and needs, as well as external factors such as incentives, rewards, and goals. We refer to these drivers as intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. So let me say that again, because that was a big mouthful. So motivation comes from the interaction among conscious and unconscious triggers linked to internal influencers, such as desires and needs, as well as external factors such as incentives, rewards, and goals. So we refer to these as internal drivers or external drivers. So it's much like we see in the picture here, the metaphoric carrot, if you will. So the carrot is the metaphor for whatever that external motivator is for you, and it feeds your internal desire and need. So if we say the carrot, again, as a symbol of what it is that we're externally, extrinsically going after, feeds an intrinsic need or desire, and that would be to nourish ourselves and survive. So I think the key of how to internalize your motivation is being able to link that external motivating factor to an intrinsic internal desire and need. So then it becomes intrinsic versus an extrinsic motivator. So understanding how the brain works and how your mind works, but more importantly, how they work together is how you'll tap into that inner motivation. So I think motivation is clearly a biological, emotional, social, and cognitive force that activates your behavior. It's really the why behind what drives us to action. So in the field of cognitive behavior, we hear about how your behavior affects the way you think and feel. And we also know through the neuroscience, how we think and feel affects our behavior. So when you put the two together, they're absolutely connected. How we think and feel affects our behavior, and how we behave affects how we think and feel. So it is circular. And the important thing is to figure out how do you tap into that circular motion of creating an intention of how you think and feel, which completely relates to how you're going to behave. So some other key factors I want to just talk about that are based in some of the neuroscience is that we've discovered that you can change the physical nature of your brain by the way you think and feel. So in other words, your thoughts change the structure of your brain. So what you think affects how you live your life. The neural networks that guide your body, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, they certainly, are the network that's going to create any change, any physical change that happens in your brain. So these changing connections are where our memories are stored, our habits are learned, personalities are shaped by reinforcing patterns in brain activity and losing others. So that's neuroplasticity. Now that's becoming a more commonly used term and understood term. So neuroplasticity is really the process of those neurons firing in your brain and then making those connections which create those neural pathways. And that is really the most simplistic way of saying is that our thought patterns can really establish how we approach our life. And when we change those neural pathways by changing our thought patterns, we also change our behavior. And then the more established those neural pathways and the stronger they get, the more that behavior becomes habitual and it really becomes our default behavior. And that is such an important concept that's based in science that we need to understand. And one of the reasons that in my book that I really got into the neuroscience of it because and same with the psychology, positive psychology and emotional intelligence, I spend, those are those three key areas I spend some time in. And from my perspective, I think we need to teach people at least at a high level, those concepts so they buy into it. We know in the field of coaching that until the client really gets it, has that light bulb go off and say, oh my gosh, now I understand why I do what I do, or I think the way I think, or I behave the way I behave. And once they have that moment of clarity, they feel like they have discovered it and they own it and they move forward based on that internal understanding. So that is really one of the reasons that I both wrote the book and I really decided to get into the science pieces of it, because you can tell somebody, be motivated. Okay. Or you can write an affirmation, right? And you can say, put that affirmation on a Post-it note and put it on the mirror. And every day you say, I'm a motivated person. But do you really believe it? Does it really work for you? I would argue that in many cases, it does not. Maybe not entirely. Maybe there are some people that can use that practice of affirmations and positive self-talk to really make it work for them. But it never really worked for me. I couldn't just read it and say, okay, I'm a positive person today. And then I would go about my business and be a positive person. However, once I started to learn about the science behind it and how I could really change the neural pathways in my brain based on the way I intentionally thought and create triggers to continue those thought processes, the more I realized that I can really retrain my brain to think differently. Therefore, I would behave differently. And once I had that realization, then I really could buy into it. And I didn't have to, I guess, play that surface game of, oh, if I just tell myself it, it's a reality, because I don't know that that works for everybody. So your entire brain is serving you all the time, right? We know your frontal lobe is your reasoning part of your brain. Your limbic system, that's all about your emotions. That's where your memories are filed. It's the file cabinet. All those things are, critical to motivation, because they all are pieces and parts of the whole system that helps you to move forward with your default behavior of being motivated consistently. So I think that, that's an important part too, that I talk about in the book, is how the whole system works, how the biology of the brain works, how the neurogenesis is a part of it as well, which is really the creation of new brain cells that help you to create new neural pathways. So I think each and every part of that is important. And, not only from the brain specifically, but I also talk a little bit about some other pieces and parts of your nervous system that contribute to your brain's workings and how all that system works together. So as Buddha says, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. And I really have come to agree with that and really buy into that from my own personal experience and from what I have learned through my journey of writing this book. So conscious thought leads to intentional behavior. Now, you go back and you think about, when you were a kid, you may have thought about, and what it was going to be like when you got to be an adult and a parent, and playing with your children or whatever other parenting responsibilities, tasks, and behaviors that you are responsible for. But you don't embark on that until you become a parent. And then once you become a parent and you have kids, then you have to intentionally think about how are you going to stay engaged with your kids, right? You're going to start to play with them. You're going to spend time with them. You're going to sit and do homework with them. And after a while, this just becomes your parenting way. It's just how you do things. Another example might be, if you decide that you're going to work on getting healthy, maybe the new year is coming, and many times we decide that our goal is going to be healthier. My 2022 goal is going to eat better plant-based food. I'm going to exercise more. So you intentionally create these thoughts, and when these conscious thoughts become your intentions, then your behavior will also follow those intentions. And the more we do that, the more habitual those behaviors become. The more habitual they become, the more of a default they also become. And we don't think about it anymore. It just becomes, this is who I am. This is the way I behave. So I now, I've intentionally decided that I'm going to work out and I'm going to eat healthier, and I'm going to have my meditation moments, whatever they might be. And the more often we practice that, it becomes our default behavior. And it's nothing different than, when you get a new job, or you start going to a location, whether it's school or whatever, and you drive that pathway 100 times, and in the beginning you're trying to figure out which light you turn right at, and you're paying attention to your stop signs and how to get there. And then after a while you're brain dead. Basically, you're driving along and you just get there. And when you get there, you say, how did I get here? I don't even remember. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was thinking about what I'm going to do when I arrived at work or arrived at school, or whatever the case may be, because your brain goes into that complete default pattern of this is the way it works, and this is how I do things, and this is muscle memory and all those good things. Well, it's my belief and my argument that we can train our brain the same way in becoming more and more habitual in how we stay motivated and find that inner drive. So I'll take a little bit of a breath there I don't know if we have anything. I'll check in with you, Carrie, if there's anything that's come up in the chat room or anything that I need to take a breath for.
Yeah, we'll let you take that breath. Sarah asked a question. I think you're using them interchangeably. Do you see a distinction between internal and external versus intrinsic and extrinsic, or do you see those as the same?
I really see that as the same. I think, sort of the definition of extrinsic motivation is really things that are factors that are coming from outside of you, and what those might be, whether it's at work and your if it's your salary, or if it's a promotion, or whatever those things might be, a new car, you're saving for a house, and those are the extrinsic motivators, or they're also external elements that are causing you to want to do something, to motivate you to take action. Intrinsically, it may be explained more about your passion. So if you like to, if you play an instrument that you just enjoy playing the flute, so you don't have to think about it. You just, when you have some quiet time, you'll go and you'll play the flute because that makes you feel good, or you'll listen to music, or you'll read a book, or whatever those things might be that make you feel good internally. Or intrinsically, which I think they're definitely interchangeable. But I guess really my argument and what I'm putting out there is that you can take those external or extrinsic motivators and turn them internal to be intrinsic motivators. So once you have the intention of your conscious thought of doing something, and you do it repetitively, it becomes an unconscious thought. But I will say, and I'm glad you asked the question, because it was another point I wanted to make while I was at this slide, there needs to be an element of joy or satisfaction that you can connect the two. And that, to me, is the sort of the secret sauce of taking the carrot and making that external or an extrinsic motivating factor intrinsic. So if you go back to the slide where I had the metaphor of the guy chasing the carrot, once you realize that achieving or grasping that carrot, or being able to get that promotion or that increase in your salary, how does that bring joy to your life? And how do you turn that into an intrinsic satisfaction? So if it means that you can provide for your family, you're putting money in the bank for your kids' college education, you'll be able to take a vacation, and you'll be able to have that time to spend quality time with your family. So wrapping that extrinsic goal into an intrinsic satisfaction of joy, happiness, peacefulness, whatever that may be, that is really how you're going to continue to work for that. So it's not like, sometimes we see, especially in the work world, employers are always challenged about how are we going to motivate our employees. So they're putting things out there all the time, whether it's a bonus, whether it's a promotion, or whether it's ham at Christmas and a turkey at Thanksgiving. So those are extrinsic, and they're fairly surface, and employers are always looking for the next way to motivate people to get them to stay with the company longer, or to perform at a higher level, and it's a constant struggle, and it costs them lots of money. So I think that being able to help the employees link those bonuses and those turkeys and those hams at Christmas and things to how that's going to benefit. It's the what's in it for me factor. If they understand that what's in it for me, then it becomes internalized. And that is, to me, that's the real secret sauce, if you will, to helping those employees to stay and maintain motivation, is helping them to link it to something that's going to be more internal in their motivation. And so that they're driven to do it because they want to do it for their own satisfaction, not to satisfy the employer, or punch out as many widgets as they can so their team wins. I mean, those are fun things and they're good. I'm not saying that they don't have their value, but that is not what's going to sustain motivation. And especially in these times that we're in right now with, was it 4.3 people left their jobs in September, and another 4 million people left their jobs in October, and our employers are just struggling to understand how are they going to keep and retain employees. And my argument is always going to be, give them something that's going to motivate them internally or intrinsically versus those. Because if you just continue to give them rewards that are, more extrinsic, they're just going to keep chasing that and chasing the next employer who offers something bigger and better. But if you can give them value that they can see where they can grow and become better people, better performers, a better career, more knowledgeable, an expert in their field, if you can continue to give them those types of things that bring real value to them, you don't need to necessarily continue to throw out those carrots. So that was a long-winded answer, but I think it just is a great question and a great comment, because it just reinforces what I'm suggesting as, how you can continue to stay intrinsically motivated, as well as if you're an employer or you work for an organization like I do. I mean, right now that I work full-time for a pharmaceutical company, and my position is talent strategy. And that's what they've tasked me to do, is say, how do we retain our employees? What can we do to keep them? And, my answer to that is bring value to them personally, the what's in it for me factor. And, you will have people that will jump ship for sure, but, why do they want to stay? Because they have that intrinsic motivation of, this is a company that I want to be loyal to because they're loyal to me, because they provide me with growth opportunities, career opportunities, value in training, value to become a subject matter expert, whatever that might be.
So Anne, along those lines, I'll let you take another breath and ask you this follow-up question. I don't think joy is the only thing that fills knowing to doing, that gap, but do you see joy as a big gap filler between the knowing and the doing? What helps maybe someone follow through on actualizing intent? And Kathleen has asked this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think it's really about understanding what the benefit is the what's in it for me factor. So if I do this, if I brush my teeth every day, I don't really want to brush my teeth every day. It takes me time. It's not fun. But if I brush my teeth every day, I will have clean, healthy teeth. And so, when you link that, the benefit to what you're doing, that is what enforces or reinforces the action and the behavior. Do I have joy brushing my teeth? No. But, when I'm finished, do I feel, like my mouth is clean and refreshed? I have no idea why I use this as an example. No idea where that came from, but, it's like, but I feel good about doing it after I do it. And, to me, that's also what is, that prompts, that triggers that motivation. So that brings that joy, if you will. Does that answer your question somewhat? Okay, good deal. All right, so here are the superpowers that I identify in my book, and these are actually what the topics of each chapter. So the initial introduction is really about self-awareness, the importance of self-awareness, understanding what your motivating factors are and how you can tap into them. And, as we know in the coaching field, self-awareness is a very important part of growing. The next topic that I talk about is mastering your mindset. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the emotional brain, using emotional intelligence to develop and sustain self-motivation. So I think there's absolutely a tie in to self-motivating and emotional intelligence and understanding your emotions. Again, that's part of self-awareness, right? Is understanding your emotions, how to manage your emotions and that type of thing. So I think that's an important part of staying motivated. If you're not able to manage your emotions and you're frustrated, you're sad, you're depressed, you're angry, you're experiencing these different emotions, they certainly can be a distractor to not only your motivation, but also equally as important is sustaining that motivation. and the emotional hijacking that, happens as well. And then, it just leaves you in a place of maybe despair or a place of displaced energy. So the other topic that I talk about in the book is well-being affects motivation. And I believe there's an absolute link between your overall health and well-being, whether it's your physical health, emotional health, and mental health, how that links back into motivation. If you're not feeling good about yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, then it's going to certainly affect your motivating drivers, if you will. So how do you stay healthy is a section in the book that I really think is an important piece of the whole puzzle. So I talk about that as well. Mental performance, breaking the boredom barrier. Again, this is a big distractor for a lot of people. Once you achieve a certain level of success, or you get into a routine, or you get into the minutia of doing, how do you break that boredom barrier? And how do you see your way out of that? And in the book, I actually take a client that I have named Mandy, who is obviously a fictitious name for a client that I had. And I actually set the whole structure of the book up as coaching this client. And one of the things that she is dealing with in her journey is that she gets bored with her job. So how do you confront that and overcome those pieces of boredom, and what causes boredom, and why do we get bored? It's amazing. Our brain is just such an amazing organ. We're hardwired to be able to process so many stimuli all the time. I mean, when we're little, babies, they're not, what we're able to process is fairly limited. But as we grow and get older and our brain becomes more mature and we have adapted to our environment, it's amazing how much we are taking in all the time. And if we're not taking in all the stimuli, we all of a sudden get bored. So what do you do with that? And if you're not being challenged at work or in your job, how do you overcome those aspects of being bored? So I spent a whole chapter just talking about breaking the boredom barrier and how you, again, can recommit to whatever your goal is that you establish and how you get past that. So your head voice, how do you talk to yourself and why it matters? And we know that self-talk and the gremlins, the monkey mind, all the different labels that we have called this voice in our head is critical to how we move forward, how we see ourselves, how we see our world, how we see others. And being able to manage your self-talk is an important piece of it as well. So this chapter I really dedicate to some different ways of managing your self-talk. Again, I go back to a comment I made earlier. For someone just to write an affirmation, I'm a positive person, to me, doesn't really cut it. And for some people it might, and I'll keep saying that because not everybody's the same. But if I say I'm a positive person every day, it doesn't mean that I approach my day as a positive person. But that self-talk of how you learn to identify it and to manage it, I think I talk about it in the book about 4 or 5 different techniques to use to be able to manage your self-talk. And why do we have self-talk? And I even go into the root of where does that self-talk come from? And I'll just say very quickly, when you're a child, it all starts right from the very beginning when you're sitting there and you're playing with your blocks and you're putting one block in front of the other and on top of the other, and the blocks all fall down, and whoever you're playing with, whether it's your caretaker, your mom, your dad, whatever, oh no, they all fell down. Oh, okay, well, let's pick them up and put them back in a pile and whatnot. So right then and there, that's where you really start to learn how to react to different things that happen, because you're mirroring and modeling how other people are reacting. So at that time, when all your blocks fall down, you say, oh no, they all fell down. It is where you learn to have that choice to say, no problem, I'll just put them back together, and this time I'll try a different way so that they're stronger and the structure is better. Or you say, oh, I'm just useless, my blocks are going to fall down every time, so I don't even want to play with this anymore, I'll play with that other toy over there. So, I mean, that's a very simplistic way of saying we learn from early childhood how our self-talk operates. And we do that, we talk out loud most of the time until we're a little bit older, maybe 5, 6, 7, and all of a sudden we learn to internalize that voice and to do that, not speaking out loud as much. And so that is really how we begin our whole process of having that self-talk that goes on in our head and our head voice all the time. So mastering self-motivation breakthrough, this is sort of how I end the book, of saying how you can take all the different pieces of it, put them together, and have your breakthrough process of feeling empowered to be motivated. So just a couple of notes I want to just say, on these chapters is really about your mindset. It arises from your worldview. It's how you see the world. It's how you perceive and interpret your environment through your perceptions. Your perceptions are your sensories, your sight, sound, smell, taste, feelings, those types of things. So how we take those sensories and, we perceive our world around us, and then we make those interpretations, and that's how we experience our experiences. So, how we see the world is our worldview, and we have the opportunity to change that. That's really our choice. I'll give you a little bit of an example. I just this is from my book. This is an example, and I'll just sort of read it real quickly here. It's late and the mall is closing. As you exit the heavy glass doors, you survey the parking lot. It's quiet, dark, and devoid of both cars and people. Your conscious mind quickly works with your unconscious mind to frame the situation as potentially dangerous. You may experience anxiousness or downright fear. The reasoning part of your brain says, based on the past, present, and potential future experiences, assumptions, and beliefs, someone could approach you to do harm. So your cognitive reasoning, along with your instinct to protect yourself, sets up a response to have your keys in hand and your finger on the panic button as you hurry to your car. Switching to another person might perceive this situation in a different way. Based on their beliefs, assumptions, and thoughts, they may frame this as a welcome, quiet stroll to their car after a hectic afternoon of shopping. They take the opportunity to feel the gentle breeze of the night and take a deep breath of fresh air after being in the staleness of the stores. They feel joyful in the peacefulness of the moment. How we view our experience determines how we experience the experience. So this is just an example of how our perceptions work and how they can really define our experiences. I'm not saying that person who's being overly cautious doesn't have a right to be and shouldn't be, but it's just an example of how we perceive and experience things is really going to be unique to us. Okay, so this actually comes from one of the first chapter, I think it is, when ask yourself what motivates me and what gets in my way. The different motivating factors that I lay out in the book, again, it's an exercise of what motivates you, what's going to work best for you. So achievement, hang on just one second. I lost my, okay. So achievement, that's really about accomplishing a goal. It can be related to careers, advancement, completing tasks, those types of things. Personal success could be about fulfilling your desires, whatever it might be, related to your value system, your belief system. Maybe it's balance in your life, balance with family, balance with work, experiencing peace and happiness. Whereas mastery is about being the best at what you do, maybe breaking records, achieving higher levels of success as you define it. Self-indulgence is really related to your ego. Maybe you want to be famous, maybe you want to have lots of money, fame, power, attention. Purpose has a very much of an internal meaning in your life. Maybe you want to contribute to the world in some way, or to some specific advocacy of an issue, or those types of things. So that might be what is your motivating driver. Relatedness, is about belonging, being able to have that social connectivity and feeling a sense of acceptance. Avoidance is also a motivator, avoiding something that might be negative, whether it's punishment and or failure, the fear of failure and those types of things. And the other is whatever it is to you, because we all are unique and different, what motivates you. And then the barriers, what gets in your way. So here's just a list of things that get in people's way, and how do we overcome those barriers? Is it, procrastination, distractors, lack of organization, confidence, boredom. These are just the different things that can pop up. So again, really understanding who you are, what are your triggers, what motivates you, because what motivates you is different than what motivates me. So in order for you to have that light bulb go off, I think you really need to go through the exercise and say, what is it that really motivates me? And then how do I link what I do back to how I can achieve that self-fulfillment of what's motivating to me? And in the book, I use, again, Mandy as my client, and it all comes together for her at the end, which it does, as a matter of fact. And she's able to take some of those tasks and those things that she does in her everyday life and connect them back to how she's going to achieve what motivates her. And she turns out that it's all about purpose for her, but she finds her purpose through the exercise and realizes the things that she's doing in life are going to help and provide that eventual destiny of achieving her purpose.
And there's a question.
Huh?
Can a motivator also be a barrier? So for instance, avoidance and perfectionism, do you see those as maybe showing up on both lists?
Absolutely. I think so. So I can't really necessarily think of an example, but I guess, if you were to say perfectionism, that may be something that motivates you. You want to be the best that you can be at everything you do, but it's also going to be a barrier because, you get to a point where you have to let it go and just say, it is what it is, and I'm okay with what it is. And then I can still be the best person or the best at whatever it is I want to do without being obsessed with perfectionism. So I think that might be an example where it could be potentially both. So creating a new neural pathway, these are the 6 steps to that process. And, from the coaching world, this will be no surprise to many of us because it's what we do when we're coaching people. But now that we've talked about all this, I think it makes more sense. And again, I go back to that anchor of when it makes sense, it's easier and I think more relevant to have that aha moment of self-discovery and buy into it when you understand why it works the way it works and how it works the way it works. So if someone just says, here are the 6 steps and gives you the 6 steps, it's not as impactful unless you understand where this comes from. So step 1 is establish the goal based on what motivates you. So when you go through that process of what are your core motivators, that's going to be an important part of step 1. Step 2, identify a behavior you want to start, stop, or continue that will support your goal. Again, it's intentional, conscious thought and behavior. Think about and describe how you feel when you successfully change your behavior. And I'll link this back to emotional intelligence and also the joy of bringing, what is the joy that you'll feel when you have changed that behavior to move you closer to your goal. Step 4, assign value to what meaning this change will have on your effort. Again, linking that to what's in it for me, what's the benefit to me if I do this. Step 5, create a trigger. We know understanding how emotional intelligence works as well as how we build a neural pathway, there's a cue that excites those neurons. And when those neurons are excited, they connect and those connections get stronger, which activates the neural pathways, which is really how we decide to behave in a certain way. It's just not by accident that we behave that way. It's those neural pathways that have been created that really cause us to think and behave in a certain way. And then step 6 is connect the behavior to your goal, internalize your motive, transforming your motive to intrinsic drivers. And of course, we always know, celebrate your success and your progress. So connecting your behavior to the goal again, and it internalizes, go back to the whole carrot and nourishing your body and maintaining that survival. So whatever that external goal is, bringing that into your, internalizing it into your intrinsic belief that this is your purpose, whatever that might be, in achieving your goals, or what's the benefit, how will you feel once you have achieved that goal. So the process is a lot. It's really taking a dive into understanding who you are, how your body works, how your brain works, how your mind works, how they work together from a biological sense, emotional sense, a physical sense, and tying all those together. Because again, just saying, you need to be motivated. And this is what really triggered me, because my father used to say that. You need to motivate yourself and get off the couch and take the trash out. Well, why? I'm very comfortable here. So it's one thing for people to tell their clients, or as a client would say, I just need to get motivated. But how do I do that? How do I actually dig down deep and figure that out? So
can you give an example of a trigger? Maybe give an example of number 5.
Okay, so a trigger that cues or excites, activates to connect. So like I'm really going blank right now. Okay, so I'll use Mandy as an example. It's hard because I have to tell you the whole backstory. I'm just trying to think. So you can do physical triggers, and it may be, how somebody will put a rubber band on their wrist and try to stop smoking, and they'll spank themselves every time they want to have a cigarette. That would be an external trigger. And you could, even if you write yourself a note, and you say, and I did this one time when in one of my earlier career moves, is I put a post-it note on my computer of the next job I wanted. And so every time that I would get discouraged, get bored, get frustrated, I would see that note and say, this is why I'm doing it. I want this promotion. I want to do this, or I want to do that. If you want to, work out and you want to get in better shape, maybe you leave your workout clothes, so that you can see them, hanging in the bathroom, so that, when you get up and dressed in the morning, that's on your radar. So you can have these little different triggers that you can plant along the way. Or if somebody says something to you, like, you can't do this, that's a trigger. Anytime someone says I can't do it, that means I'm going to work harder to do it. So I guess, just whatever works for you. And in my book, I say, that Mandy, one of her triggers that she wanted to get in shape was to put a dress that she had a goal to get into. And it wasn't the dress as much as it was the feeling of being more physically fit. And so in the beginning of the book, and I use the surfaced affirmations, if you will, and those examples, that dress is all about, fitting into the dress. By the end of the book, the dress symbolizes being healthy, being in good shape, being mentally, physically, emotionally in a good place, because she has worked hard to, work out, eat healthy, those types of things. So linking that dress into not just looking nice and fitting into the dress, but what does the dress mean? The dress means that I lost those 10 pounds that I wanted to lose, but I'm a healthier, happier person, and I can find more joy in the fact that I feel good about myself. Does that help? And your triggers have to be different. I mean, your triggers are your triggers. They have to be what it is that triggers you, that helps you find that place to stay back or get back on track or stay on course. So I'll just finish it up with unlocking the mysteries of self-motivation, again, using the principles of neuroscience, positive psychology, and emotional intelligence. Retraining your brain. We know through neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and some other neuroscience principles that we can train our brain or retrain our brain, and with intentional thought and intentional behavior, and create new neural pathways. And the more often we follow that process, the more habitual, the stronger those pathways get, and it becomes our default behavior, and it becomes just the way we are and the way we live. And hopefully we can link that to that experience of feeling joy in that, and the benefit of what's in it for me. Reflect and reframe. So if this is part of the overcoming the barriers, how do you look at things? What's your perspective? How are you interpreting the experience? What can you do differently to get past the barrier? And in coaching, we work through this with our clients all the time, is how do you overcome those barriers? What are they potentially? What actions do you have or thoughts do you have when that barrier comes up? How will you get over that barrier? So understanding how to reflect and reframe will help you through that, those barriers. Responding versus reacting. This is linked back to emotional intelligence. So something happens that's going to derail you, and maybe it's an emotional hijacking. What is your response versus your reaction? And this is one of the principles for growing emotional intelligence, is being able to take that deep breath, reframe the situation, and think about how I want to respond to this in a reasonable, intentional way, versus just having this reactionary emotional explosion. And then the last piece of it is to refocus or recommit. Stay on focus, stay on path. And then there's always things in life that get in your way, and that you have to just take a step back and refocus and recommit and say, this is really what I want to do. And if you're in some of you might be in your doctorate program or have finished it or whatever, and if you can't refocus and recommit, it's going to be a long, hard struggle. So we're always being thrown that curveball, or something in life just pops up unexpectedly, and we need to really be able to take a look at what is it that we want to accomplish. And sometimes it means that we have to realign our goal, or rethink it, or delay it, or whatever those things might be. But it doesn't mean we have to give up on it either. All right, so that ends my presentation, and we have a few minutes left. So I don't know if you have any other questions that have come up, or thoughts or comments.
Well, thank you, Anne. This is fabulous. Your slide deck is beautiful. There's no further questions in chat, but I do encourage people, if you'd like to take yourself off mute and ask anything that's top of mind, please feel free.
I will also say that, with my email address on here, if you think of something later, or you want to have further discussion or whatever, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to. This is my favorite topic, so I'm more than happy to talk your ear off.
I think Kathleen might have something.
I do. Hi, Anne. It's really interesting, and I'm right with you on trying to find what motivates talent, not just to stay, but to love it. And it's been shown that disconnect between purpose of the organization and purpose of the individual is what makes motivation suffer, and makes one wonder what's the point of what they're doing. So how I can understand what you're saying at the individual level, for an individual to find that intrinsic connection, to stay motivated. But I'm wondering, how are you doing that at scale?
Well, I think there's a couple of comments I'll make. I think first of all, working for an employer that you are aligned with values and beliefs and, you know, their mission, that's important. So when you're looking for a job, that's part of it. It's not just finding a job to do your discipline or whatever your subject matter expertise might be, but finding a job that you're working for an organization that you align with. That's your responsibility, and you should own that. And if you're not there in that moment, because you're trying to build your resume or whatever, then you need to own that too, and realize that you have to become self-motivated for your own intrinsic reasons of where you're going to go after you work for that employer. So, you know, there are times where I have done in my career, work for employers or have worked in industries that I didn't really align with. And now in retrospect, I think, wow, I can, you know, that was kind of crazy times, but it gave me the skills, the experience to build my resume, to move on to something else that was more in line with me. So your choice is, do you find an employer that aligns with your own personal values? Or if you're not aligned with them, you know, then your intrinsic individual motivating factor is, how do I get the best I can out of this job, grow as much as I can, build my resume, build my skill level so that I have more of a choice of where I will go next. And, you know, I think the other thing too is employers, from my perspective, and this is what I try to coach my employer, is they need to walk the walk, walk the talk, and make sure that their behaviors, the company's behavior, aligns with what their mission statement says and what their values statement say. And that's one of the things that I work on all the time. If I see leaders who are not in alignment with what we have posted on the poster, if you will, then I call them out on it and say, look, if you want people to stay, you can't act like this. You cannot behave like this. Your values say this. So it's a coaching opportunity if you're in that position to be able to do that.
Thank you, Anne. There's been some fabulous comments added into chat that I'll give you a couple minutes to react to. I just want to thank everybody for being here for this session. We will have more coaching and context webinars coming up in 2022. We will be announcing that lineup soon. We're very excited, as we want to continue to bring you quality content, not only brought to you by scholars like Anne and alumni, but sometimes from our own evidence-based coaching faculty. So be looking for that announcement coming out. I'll make sure it hits all of you who are here, along with putting it in our base camp. And I want to wish everybody a wonderful day, and be sure to click the link if you need to receive a resource development ICF-CEU. You need to fill out that evaluation, and those will be coming out from the registrar's office. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.